The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back. David Mickey's Shiny Side Out. This is show number 515. You heard some news on the first hour, of analysis of current affairs, etc., etc. It is a crazy world, but this hour is devoted to the hypothesis. What is the hypothesis? Well, the hypothesis is a new cosmology, in a way. It's a new way of explaining the world. It is our way of explaining the world. Its genesis lies in probably 40, 50, 60 years of research between us. And
easy,
right? In the last 10 years of having this show where we can do the research in anger and actually go deeper than a hobby would allow, because obviously what we want to do is not give you some blah blah show, but rather a show where we have researched as well as we can. Will we get it right every time? No, of course not. Is the hypothesis flawed? Well, as any hypothesis is, yes, certainly. I'm sure there's much room for improvement. But ultimately, though, what we found is that the hypothesis explains a lot. And I want to just focus, just before we take the wider view, I just want to focus on the one thing, Dave.
What's that? Very
quickly. It's around dimensional realities. I spoke about that a little while ago on another platform, but if you look at all the phenomena in the world, Dave, I mean all the strange, the majority of the strange things. I want to list a few here, like the UFO phenomenon, right? Like, or UAP as it's called now, right? Or Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, etc. I mean, when I say one term, just think of it as an umbrella term, okay? USOs, under submerged objects, disappearances, like especially from wilderness areas, right? In fact, a lot of these phenomena go hand in hand. Poltergeist phenomena of dimensional displacement, when things couldn't have possibly moved the way they did, or were put in the way they were. I mean, or even Mandela effect scenarios.
Past lives,
yeah. And all of this makes perfect sense if you look at the world from a higher dimensional reality. And by that I mean, okay, so we live.
This is when we begin flat Earth, but
yeah. Well, in a way.
Yeah, I know, right?
We live in a three spatial. We've got three spatial dimensions. Okay, that's what we have. I think we can all agree on that. And we have a fourth dimension of duration. Without duration, our world could not exist. Full stop. It just wouldn't. You're with me? Like, if there's no duration, nothing happens. Like,
so I'm happy in my XYZ.
Yes.
But while I'm sitting here in my XYZ and not moving, time is going on.
So time seems to flow. Like we in reality we're living in the eternal now, right? We have a moment. Now we remember the past. Now imagine we didn't remember the past.
Oh,
right?
boy.
That'd be terrible, right? But we do. So we remember the past, but we can't repeat it. So it's gone, right? And then we have the now, which is where we are, which is great, but very few of us are ever in the now. And then we have the future, which hasn't happened yet, we think, and we don't know it. We have some inkling as to what it might be. We make plans. Some people that can see it through.
Deja vu too.
All of that, right? Now, but so we've got four dimensions we're working. So let's put time duration to the side, because without it, nothing happens. Okay, so that's to the side. It's always there. Now, what you have, and then you go down one dimension, you go to flatland, right? 2 dimensions. In flatland, you live on a plane, and you're a triangle or a square or whatever, but you're a 2-dimensional object. That's your world. Now, for me, a 3-dimensional creature, right? Again, duration is always considered to be there. You're flat, and I can do things in your world that will blow your mind. right? I could take stuff and move it in your world, and you wouldn't know how it moved. It would just disappear. It would have popped out of existence and popped back in, as far as you're concerned.
Yeah, I can change my shape.
Completely.
Because the plane of the XY, if you move vertically through the XY, your appearance there will change shape.
Yes.
As you change height, you change your 0 on the Z. So it makes total sense.
Yeah, and take it further, yeah. So if I wanted to, right, I could move. So if you live in flatland in 2 dimensions, to go from A to B, you actually have to go the entire distance between A and B. That's the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, right? So you have to go from A to B, you have to travel the entire length. Now, but me in my 3rd dimension, I don't have to do that. I simply fold over your flat land, and punch through, and instantaneously, this is the key word here, instantaneously arrive at my destination. And I say it's key here because not only can you explain strange or paranormal phenomena, you can also much easier explain the quantum world if we take the higher dimensional view. So now let's translate that kind of thinking into our 3-dimensional world. Again, duration is happening. That's the 4th dimension. But now let's talk about a 4th spatial dimension. So in the reality that we inhabit, each dimension is at right angles to the next.
Mm-hmm.
Can we agree on that? I
think
that's easy enough. The next spatial dimension will also be at a right angle, but it's something we can't actually visualize. We can mathematically describe it. We can't actually, in your head, it's very hard to.
And you couldn't. This is the thing. The problem with flatland people in 2 dimensions, you cannot explain the z-axis.
No.
To them, and so if there was another axis, you can't explain it to us.
No, and you can't perceive it. You see, it's impossible for you to actually. So if we took a flatlander into our 3-dimensional world, first of all, they wouldn't understand what happened in that transition, and then they would be in a reality that they just didn't comprehend. If we could somehow have the technology or whatever to acclimatize the flatlander to our world, its mind would be blown. Because we go, oh my God, look at this. Now, just hold that thought.
In the story Flatland, they do take one piece out and show them their world from above.
Yes.
And then they place them back in, and good luck with explaining that to people.
Now, hold that thought for a second, right? So, so we have this 4th spatial dimension is at a right angle to our 3 dimensions. Now, if I am a 4-dimensional, spatially, right, dimensional being, I could move around our world in seemingly impossible random ways. I would blink in and out of existence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I would be able to instantaneously go across whatever distance. I would be able to move things into seemingly impossible locations. I could make things disappear and reappear. I could plug people in and out. And you know what's funny? A lot of people report confusion or an inability to describe their experiences, etc., when they're confronted with things like that, right? Displacement, abductions, and all that. UFOs or UAPs, they just pop in and out of existence. How?
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Abductees, for instance, knowing full well that what they're saying doesn't make sense to their brain, but they'll say, I was kind of hovered off my bed and I passed through the ceiling or through the wall horizontally, through a wall that they know is solid, or the window they knew was not even open or openable. And this description of being able to pass through objects and go somewhere very similar, Meki.
Yeah. And that's really the kicker, right? So you have these all of these strange things that are happening in our reality here, right? All of a sudden make perfect sense. Because, well, it's just what happens in a higher dimensional space. And I think that's how we have to look at the world, as a higher dimensional construct, right? We can no longer simply say, oh, no, look, this doesn't work or that doesn't work. And we have to now. We have to allow for the higher dimensions and creatures or beings that inhabit that as well. because that's pretty much where we are. This is what it is now, right? We are in the world that sees these things happening. And so you have to ask yourself how. And once you accept that possibility that there's a higher dimensional space and that's interacting with us, once you accept that, right? Once you truly see, okay, that makes all of a sudden you go, oh, okay, Mickey, that makes sense. I don't know.
I know I've said that to Mickey quite a lot.
What?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Mickey, yeah, that makes sense. Because truly. So we have accepted, and look, so we've had anecdotal stories from millions of people around the world of, say, UFOs or USOs underwater performing feats of speed beneath the water without cavitating the water, without making bubbles, being able to go from here to the horizon in just a matter of seconds beneath the water, which is impossible. We can't do that at all. The wake behind us, if we were to do it, would be so extraordinary that it could, cause a tsunami. If we wanted to travel that far, 700 kilometers an hour underwater. So what we've seen, the Tic Tac, for instance, performing impossible maneuvers, things that behave and can do right angles at impossible speeds that would turn any human into just a liquid goo on the inside of the spaceship, should that they have been present. Though there must be things that we're incapable of doing science-wise to withstand that or have those flight characteristics to appear from here, blink out, and then blink back into existence somewhere else. Is it a cloak? It could be. It could be they've folded space and just appeared there, having not actually travelled anywhere, but we see their movement through the sky in a way that their folded space means that they travelled there, or so this is what we've had to realise on an individual level is what's truly happening in our time. Mickey, I was watching some of The Ranch.
Good man.
Yeah, drinking game for everyone. I mentioned it, so you have to have a shot. So the electrified ground experiment that said there was voltage in the ground and made no sense to anybody.
It was conducting and it was acting like a battery, which is
that's
crazy.
Right. I know. So there's energies around the world. We know about ley lines. We know that all the ancient cultures built on these ley lines of energy. Then there's so many lines. They're as a perfect, like you cut the earth in half. That circumference of the circle of the cut is a continuous straight line right around, meeting itself in 360 degrees. So there's a number of those that all intersect every one of the ancient monuments and ancient civilizations' main sites, including, Meki, the Norwegian sites, that the castles were built in places where the people said the star people told them to build them. Wow. So without a specific measuring device to find where that would be, they were told, you just build it there, and that'll be the best spot. So there's energies, there are dimensions. Imagine being able to work out the subspace, the area, the region between realities, which is subspace, or between objects within our reality, for instance, and be able to communicate instantaneously between them.
Yeah, and this is really the thing. A lot of cultures talk about gateways, all right?
Yeah.
A lot of ancient cultures talk about
American Native Indians and the,
in fact, go on.
The ones in New Mexico, Meki, where it looks like a doorway in a stone.
Yes.
They said this is where they came through.
Yes, absolutely. So this is really the kicker here, right? And it seems that Bigfoot, again, this is an umbrella term for all of these creatures, seems to be making use of those gateways. People that are disappearing in national parks, I believe there are a lot of, I used to call them thin places. Now, they're thin places from our point of view, but in reality, they're thick places. I think I mentioned this before.
Yeah.
Where dimensions not dimensions, where multiverses or universes are stacked on top of each other, right?
And they kind of interconnect.
So let me just
thin would be the gap between where the gap is thin. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's so many, they're overlapping.
That's right.
It's a thick place. If you look at it from a spatially four-dimensional point of view, it'd be a thick place. Now, see, the thing is this: our multiverse. So if you got Flatland, you can think of the multiverse. A Flatland multiverse is like a book. Each page in this book is a universe, for argument's sake, right? That's a Flatland multiverse. Now, for us, if you have higher spatial dimension, 4 spatial dimension, 5, whatever, you're looking at our universe in the same way as we would look at Flatland, and you stack them on top of each other in a book fashion or whatever you want, all at right angles to each other, but they're stacked, and that's the multiverse. So the multiverse exists in 4 spatial and 1 time dimension. It has to, because it can't stack in the 3 dimensions we have. Otherwise, it would be right here. It's not, right? There might be overlap, but it is stacking in the 4th spatial dimension, right?
Yeah.
And that's the multiverse. And so we need to get higher yet. So our actual reality, our megaverse, because meta is someone else. Our megaverse would be in the 5th or 6th spatial dimension, potentially.
Yeah, so I see our environment as a virtual environment that we're in right now, this physical one that we call physical. And if you could have a number of these occupying the same space, like if there was if you just pretended that the whole of the universe was in a box, but you had multiple universes and they're all out of phase from each other, they could all exist in the same place, and you'd only see the one that you're in phase with. That's a way of being able to kind of describe it, but it's not describing it at all. Probably the best description that I can do, like if I was a Flatlander trying to describe the single page because they didn't know what a page was, so I'm trying to use the words that would make sense. Yeah, you can be above this. Above what? No, but we're only 2 dimensions. Well, what is the above? What does that mean? So the easiest way to try to think about this is that if they're all out of phase, like we dabbled in this when we had the telegraph. So initially 1 pair of telegraph wires going would consume a single pair until I forget the inventor's name, but decided what they were going to do was put 2 signals 180 degrees out of phase from each other down the same line. So the same copper pair could now have its own pair, 1 each. There'd be 2. And they'd be able to talk not to each other, but to the end point pair. So they're basically quantum entangling on a Morse code line, another pair at the other end. Think about that. So they ended up with 16 of these Morse code units on the telegraph line on a single copper pair. You have to use the terminology we've got. So it's likely a good explanation for being able to consume the same space just simply being out of phase. And if you wanted to disappear, you could simply turn yourself out of phase, but you'd appear somewhere else. So that's Mickey, my poor feeble brain, that's the way, because I know what and how complicated the 4th dimension, it would be the 5th dimension to be honest, but 4th spatial dimension is difficult to describe to anyone. It's not even a shape we can kind of make in this dimension.
No, but it does explain why all these interactions, and this is really where I don't know if you want to talk about it or not, but we'll talk about it in a second. I'll prompt your memory.
What's is it like S9 or something? What's it called?
It's S32. We have to look it up. This is what I'm talking about. That you described this once to me, and you saw this in there, right? There we go. And it's
yes, that's right.
People describe confusion when they or it's hazy. They can't fully understand what they're seeing, or their mind can't process necessarily what they're seeing when they are transported or when they're falling through dimensions or whatever it might be. And there's this confusion, headaches. There's nosebleeds. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh
that goes
boy,
with
don't
it,
I know about those?
right? So I think it is highly likely that on one level, right, because we've seen ample evidence for this now, this is a simulation, but on another level, it is as real as it gets. Now, these two are not mutually exclusive, and what I mean by that is ultimately all we have is the moment, the now, and us within it. But the question comes back then: who are you? What is us? What is you? What is I? And this fundamental essence of us is it, can we call it a soul or a car, an energy, chi? I don't know, whatever you want to call it, whatever makes the fundamental you, but across multiple dimensions, lifetimes, and years of time. In fact, time in itself, it seems to be an illusion, but necessary for this multiverse. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I found an image of the 5D hypercube.
Oh wow! Yeah. Okay.
Which, if you use a shadow of it, it makes sense to your brain.
Yes. It is. Oh, great. Yeah, that's the example I used before.
Yeah.
Because this is the thing. Like we cast a shadow, obviously, in this world, and it's a flat it's truly a two-dimensional object.
That's right.
Because it has no depth. It is simply the blocking out of light. That's what it is, right? That's really how flatland works. But if you look at our shadow, any person, any shadow of anything, you can describe some attributes of the object that casts the shadow. You can.
There we go. Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, depending on the light source and the intensity of the light, where it's shining from, the angle, whatever, it will give you different shadows at different times.
Yeah.
And and I think in many ways our true selves are casting a shadow here, and the body that we have. It's not the body that we inhabit. That's the prison. The shadow that we cast is whatever inhabits this body that makes us us. Now, a shadow is a poor approximation of you. In the same way that whatever inhabits this prison is a poor approximation of our true nature, our true existence. Now you can draw conclusions from it. I mean, you look at a shadow and you can draw some conclusions. In the same way, you can look at whatever inhabits this prison, like our soul, whatever. You look at it and you go, okay, as far as you can draw some inferences as to what your real self must be like. Because if the soul that is here, the energy that makes you is just a shadow of your true self cast into this four-dimensional, the time-dimensional, world. In fact, really, if we're talking multiverse, it's four spatial and one time-dimensional, like I said. But this is really what it is. But you should look at this hypercube or the shadow of the hypercube, and it is very, very. Look, it's impossible to completely comprehend it. Full stop. You can't. You just can't do it, right?
Yeah.
But the shadow, you can look at it and go, okay, well, the shadow kind of makes sense. You look at it and go, okay,
I'm going to post that into the chat room so people can understand what we're looking at.
Because because we are connecting corners of a cube through a dimension that we don't have access to.
Mm-hmm.
If you
get my... Mickey, we're in a car driving really fast away from the audience.
I know, right? Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Honestly, it is a very difficult thing to describe. No one has a great way of describing it. You have to use your intelligence when you're looking at the image of what a hypercube looks like. Look at the shadow and you see a pattern, and that pattern changes if you rotate the object, and it's only our perception of it that is changing and it hasn't changed.
The funny thing is this, though, Dave. If you look at really old art, ancient art, or art in churches, you will see representations. The flower of life, the tree of life.
Mm-hmm.
You will see higher dimensional shadow representations of these objects. So these are higher dimensional objects, but in our art we've captured their shadows.
Yes.
So this you're going, what? How? What? And the answer is, well, who knows? In fact, there's something called a heptaract, which is a 7D cube. Okay, a heptaract.
Yeah,
and
right.
that looks like the tree of life. It looks like a mandala. If you look at it, it looks like a mandala, the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, oh, wow. And you go, well, so clearly ancient cultures, like we're not the first to think this, guys. We're not the first to bring this information to you. Or maybe to you, but you know, people have thinking up this kind of stuff for a long, long time. Right? And clearly there were high civilizations within this reality frame here that have figured it out, but they were destroyed for whatever reason, right? And we have lost a lot of knowledge, possibly, in my opinion, the understanding as to how to get out of here in the first place. And I think it's going to be it would be a lot easier than just the pineal gland and all this meditation and the breathing and whatnot, right? I really do believe there should be a really simple way to get out of here. We just don't remember it. We can't remember it. We've forgotten too much since we've been here. It's that simple.
That's a shame.
Right?
Yeah.
I know, man. I know. It's but a lot of the Hindus, if you yogis, they're using these mandalas, and these mandalas are really the shadow representations of higher dimensional objects. Right? That's what they are.
Yeah.
The tree of life, the flower of life. Google that, and then compare it to a tesseract, or or 5-dimensional toroidal hypercube. Right?
Yes.
Or pentaract, or any of those, right? And you go, heptaract. In fact, the heptaract, that's the tree of life right there, man. It's just beautiful. And so these points in high dimensional spaces, they all connect, right? And if we went into a 5 or 7 dimensional kind of space, we would never be able to find our way out of it. We just couldn't.
Meki, some of these resemble Mandalas. Sorry. No, not Mandalas. Fractals.
Yeah, completely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Totally organic looking image that looks like it's an equation.
Yeah, and then you would expect that because nature is built on this.
That's right. Absolutely, 100%.
This is natural, sacred, or sacred. We don't even call it sacred. It's just
3x plus 1. Right? I know.
Yeah, there you go. But it all comes out of that. I mean, you look at the Fibonacci sequence. Any natural kind of progression of form, and we got the Platonic bodies, right? The 7, I think 7 or 5 perfect shapes, as it were. Let me just double check that I don't tell you something wrong. And anything that arises out of those in any dimensional Platonic solids, here we go, in any dimensional shape would be fantastic. So here the Platonic solids are
link me.
They're geometric solids whose faces are all identical, essentially, right?
Yep.
So that's what Plato said. You got the tetrahedron, cube, octahedron. Then you got a whole bunch of others as well, and they of course derive themselves like from a triangle, a square, and a pentagon, etc., etc. So these are dodecahedron and the icosahedron as well. Those are the 5 Platonic solids. All the faces are the same shape, and you translate those into higher dimensions, and all of a sudden you come up with all kinds of crazy things that we've been representing in art for thousands of years. And so clearly people have thought about this stuff for a long time, right? And we lost so much. So much is gone.
Yeah, I really wish the library was never burnt down, Becky.
Oh, dude.
I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was looking at some Sumerian tablets, and one of them had Pythagoras, or it had the sine and tangent calculations on it, used as a template, just like our textbooks did.
Yeah, the
sine, cos, and tan.
Yeah, Pythagoras wasn't the first, and in fact,
no,
they were using it for a simple area calculation to settle a land dispute. That's what they were using
20,000 years ago, Mickey.
6.
Oh no, there was one recently found that they've dated to 20,000 years ago.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean that's.
And guess where it was?
Because
Sumer.
Of course it would be. But math is a fundamental truth.
That's right.
I mean, 1 + 1 is 2. And you can turn on your head, and a right angle triangle will always be a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's just,
that's right.
It's just what it is, right? I mean, you can stand on your head and not want to believe that, but math is pretty incorruptible.
Meki, so this is talking to Pythagoras. Pythagoras, there's problems in life that can't be solved with triangles.
Well, if they are, I don't want to hear about it.
That's from Red Dwarf.
I know.
But look, you're absolutely right. So Meki, all right. So we have. I accept that we have multiple dimensions. I accept that we have multiple universes, that we live in a multiverse. I also accept that the entire thing is virtual anyway. So I'm kind of across the line on all of these things. I accept that we might have dimension hopping Bigfoots. There's just a species that kind of, like Predator, but they're Bigfoots. I accept that UFOs have been seen in the vicinity of them, so maybe they're the pilots. Yeah, that people go missing in national parks for absolutely no reason and turn back up again, inexplicably turn up again.
Yep.
Within the search perimeter, and don't have any recollection of the time in between.
Bingo.
And they don't appear as though they've been living rough for that period of time in days as well. Just as though they walked through a portal unbeknownst to them and turned out somewhere else, eventually going, oh, and then backing out of it, but only for days to have occurred in between and not being able to describe it to anyone. I just don't know. What? What day is this?
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Why are all the people in uniforms looking for me, right? So with that and UFOs, not saying they're alien yet, but probably another, Terran. That's a name for Earth. So maybe another Terran who shares a planet with us. There's technology that's way beyond what we've got. I mean, way beyond, and that no current civilization on the planet that we would associate ourselves with owns it. That we would have visitors, maybe people that live, and it sounds crazy, live on the moon. Maybe they're the Watchers, who live for thousands of years each, right? Respectfully, there's so much that Meki that we've been looking at that I just now plainly accept.
See, this is you mentioned something very important here, and I've been thinking about this as well because obviously you talk to people all the time, right? In your sessions.
Oh,
and
sure.
What and I guess yourself as well, by extension, Dave, view to be a reality is so far removed from what most people perceive to be reality that conversations about those subjects is almost impossible. You just I mean, well, what do you think about this? I can tell you what I think about certain things and aspects, sure, right? But if you ask me like a broad sweeping question as to what do you think about this what is it all about? It is not an easy answer for me, right? And suffice it to say, it took 10 years and 5 iterations of the 100th or 200th show to explain the hypothesis in full, and you really needed all of the shows in between as foundations, to understand the bigger picture. So I really rarely discuss this now with anyone because it is so far removed from what anybody else believes that there's no point unless you're meeting someone who has done their own research. And the funny thing is, people that don't come necessarily to the same conclusions, but come to very similar conclusions. And then as you dig, you understand that the ancient mystery schools, right, came to similar conclusions or the same conclusions, and they explain it in those terms as well.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And it is just a it's not it is not a self-fulfilling what's called not cognitive bias. What's the word? Where you're looking for things that are supporting your theory. I can't think of the term now, but
confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias. Thank you. I'm not looking for stuff that supports me. I'm looking at any stuff. But whenever a new piece of information comes, from wherever, and you go, oh, okay, well, that fits, or that fits. And to be honest with you, I have not yet come across a piece of information which has been, verifiable as actually existing, that goes against anything in the hypothesis, right? And the further back in time I go, right, the more peoples and cultures and belief systems I find that believe in reincarnation, for example, right? Or they believe that this is not the real world, right? This is a shadow world. This is the domain of the great adversary, etc., etc. And none of these are Dave's or my original thoughts. They really aren't, right? And you get this confirmation from, but what you have on the other hand here is belief systems, right? You have the religions believe in things, and I don't happen to believe that, but it's a belief. I mean, you can believe whatever you like, but don't ask me to believe it as well if you can't give me any evidence. Science is the same way, right? Give me evidence. If you've got something that is no longer called a theory, but a fact of science, then okay, here we are. But as long as something is called a theory of something, theory of evolution, theory of gravity, it's open for debate.
That's right.
And you can't believe in a theory. You can support a theory, and you can try to find evidence for your theory, but you cannot believe in the theory of evolution. You cannot believe in the theory of gravity. You cannot, because that goes directly against the scientific principle.
Yes.
You don't need to believe. You know. So as soon as you know, you don't have to call it a theory. But as like I said, as long as it's a theory, it's a theory. Now, scientists are questioning the existence of dark energy, of dark matter. Right? String theory has gone out of fashion a bit as well.
Do you remember how strongly they were holding on to dark matter?
Because you needed it, because it didn't make any sense.
That's right. Nothing made sense without it.
We had to invent this dark matter, right? And then on top of that, we also had to invent this dark energy, right?
Yeah.
And we still can't make sense of gravity, unless gravity is a multidimensional force, which we only see. And again, it makes sense if you look at it from a higher dimensional point of view, like a fourth or fifth spatial dimension. All of a sudden, gravity makes sense because most of gravity is there. If
there was just for giggles, right? So imagine if there was 100 overlapping dimensions where we are right now.
Yeah.
And the Earth, the gravity that the Earth has, and because gravity is such a weak force, it was only 1/100th of the true gravity the object actually has, but it's split between realities or between dimensions. Then we've only got 1/100th of it, then it would all kind of make sense. If the Earth's gravity was 100 times what it is, or maybe 1,000,000 times what it is, yeah, that'd be good. That would kind of make everything work. But since it's so darned weak, that if you had two atoms in a gas field of hydrogen gas only, the likelihood of them wanting to come together and just bump into each other is so low, Mickey, I've got to say, so extraordinarily low that one atom would attract another atom towards it, thence giving them the power and strength of the gravity of two atoms occupying the relative space next to each other, that they would attract then yet another atom, then having 3 times that. It's so low that science currently doesn't understand how a gas cloud can turn into a sun without a seed of something.
And again, we don't really know terribly much. I mean, we're looking at the universe as it is now, right?
That's right.
And we've been doing that in anger for, let's call it 10,000 years, right? But really, with high tech, I guess what we call high tech, only for a couple 100 years, right? And we're looking at our part of the universe. We're looking, further out into the universe, and the universe is a lot bigger than it should be, considering when it should have been born. So the expansion, looks like it was faster than the speed of light, if there was expansion.
That's
or not.
right.
Now people are saying, well, the universe has always been around. There was no Big Bang. There was no great contraction. It was just always there. So, look, we don't know.
Which leads towards my hypothesis
Yeah, I know.
For the universe. Yep.
Yeah, and you're right, Dave. Your proposition is as valid as any other proposition.
That's right.
You've got evidence for it, right? That's the key thing. Having said that, we must keep our mind open here, right? And there's so many things coming at us. It is very, very difficult to keep track of it. So that's what Dave and I try to do from a cutting-edge science point of view. We keep up to date with whatever we can, but there are advances made in all fields all the time. And the age of humanity, we're finding new species. We're finding that, maybe islands can disappear overnight. Maybe islands can come up overnight. I mean, catastrophic events happen.
Yeah.
The steady state theory, in my mind, is completely dead. It's dead.
That's
it's
right.
in the water. Never had a leg to stand on, right?
That's true.
And catastrophism and punctuated equilibrium make a lot more sense because that's the world we live in. Here we are. It's happening every day. I mean, we just had a huge explosion in the Pacific. Massive.
Yep.
That island is now pretty much gone. It's gone. Right? And we have events like this all the time. I mean, God forbid, imagine if Yellowstone blew up. That has the potential to set us back hundreds of years, if not more, right? Potential.
Yeah.
And there's nothing we can do about that.
So about 700 years ago, Mickey, in the Pacific somewhere, the source of a tsunami that was about 150 meters tall, and it washed into Sydney over the heads and all the way to the Blue Mountains.
Yep.
Because they found sediment. Now, we can't find a source of it, but it was described as a meteor impact. Yep. Now, that could change simply because we might have had an underwater eruption.
Sure.
That was like a mega volcano size that caused it, right?
Yeah.
At the moment, it's just like Mickey's saying, the current textbooks are so far out of date that if you were to hold on to the belief that is within them, you'd be a laughing stock. So right now, this front face of science, the bleeding edge of what's coming up next and what we believe in, I let some things go through to the keeper, Becky, like dark matter. I let that go through because I didn't believe a word of it. It was an excuse. We're seeing so much of this now, and it's across not just in the maybe relative planetary sciences or spatial science. We're seeing this across everything. And yet, still, one thing remains, the good old double slit experiment, which proves time doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Causality doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
That is such an amazing thing for us. And I want to say this because part of the hypothesis is staying abreast of the current info. If we'd not done the double slit experiment ever, we could have just wrapped up the textbooks and gone to bed. No dramas. Sweet as. Hey, look, I think we've got this world figured out. It's fantastic, isn't it? Yeah. Right, what are we going to do tomorrow? Nothing.
Our head is full.
We don't need to do anything more because everything makes perfect sense. But the moment they did that experiment, that was the end of that, and it was the beginning of the embarkation of a brand new thing to try and work out again. I wonder how many civilizations had to do that. I wonder if there's any, Mickey, that never got past that. I'd love to have been in a steampunk world that never realized science any further.
Well, look, what I know for a fact is, well, I don't really know for a fact, but I strongly suspect civilizations that existed on this planet before ours, like I'm talking about high civilizations, like 10, 15, 20,000 years ago, and even further back in time, right? That are now completely lost to myth, and only some monuments remain. I'm pretty sure that they would have gone a potentially very different route of science or exploration or endeavor, right? And we know this because some of the science, and we've done shows on this, they have survived to this day, like acupuncture, what's feng shui, like the ley lines, like all of that stuff and astrology as well.
Yeah.
Astrology, believe it or not, I know people poo-poo it all the time, is canningly accurate if you do it properly.
Yeah.
It's uncanny how accurate it is, and not just only. I myself, not for a long time now. I was a practitioner of the tarot. I used the Rider-Waite deck. That was my preferred deck, and think of it as not really a number like a random number generator, but think of it as a sort of like an oracle or search engine. Think of it that way. And as you interact with others, there are energies at play. There are things at play you can't see, don't understand. I mean, show me electricity, right? You can. Oh, there's lightning. Okay, right. But can you show me the electricity that flows through your machines? Or show me magnetism. Show me gravity. You can't see these forces. You see the effect, of course, but you can't see them. And this is similar, where things. Let me just make a very simple point of this. We know that the moon influences the Earth, right? It causes the tides. Now, we also understand that the moon influences women's menstrual cycles, right? And we also understand that the sun and the moon together influence the path of the Earth, right? And on it goes. So celestial bodies have an effect on the Earth. They also have an effect on us, right? Never mind the radiation that comes from those bodies. And just because they're very, very, very far away doesn't mean there isn't some kind of gravitational or radiational or whatever effect on them, right? And it really is. It is uncanny when you look at when someone does a chart for you that knows what they're doing, or someone does a reading for you that knows what they're doing. It is really quite astounding how accurate that stuff is. It's scary, and that's, for me, that's a science that was lost. Now, we call it now a pseudoscience or some kind of hocus pocus. It's not that at all. And there's many other things like that, right? And because Feng Shui works, but acupuncture works, okay? Li lines, they're a thing. I mean, you look at all the churches these days, the old churches, right, that exist, or even mosques or temples. They're built on ancient sites of power, on ancient sites of worship. That's where energies were strongest. It's a fact that most of the buildings that we worship in today are built on ancient worship sites, and these sites were worshipped for a reason. There's no coincidence. I mean, sometimes maybe, but for the most part, people would build these monuments or buildings or whatever they are in places that had meaning or were special in some way. Right?
Yeah.
You look at some places in the world, Dave. I mean, look at the Bermuda Triangle, but other places as well, the Devil's Triangle, and again, the Ranch. But there are places like that, or Black Mountain, or is it Black Rock?
Yes,
in
Black
Queensland.
Black Mountain.
Black
Hill.
Black Hill. And you go, okay, well, that's really weird. Excuse me. These are we know these places are different. We know they are odd, but we can't put our finger on it, right? We just don't know enough. But maybe civilizations before us, they had that science figured out, right? They might not have had electricity, but they might have another way of lighting darkness. They may not have internal combustion, but they might have used other engines or power sources to power their machines, whatever they might be, right?
Yeah, and then there's the teles, so telekinesis.
Yeah.
They might have had, telepathy.
Yeah.
Well, an abundant, well-taught, well-used telepathy. There's things around we have words for. Like if telepathy wasn't a thing, there wouldn't be a description of it.
Well, that's correct.
It's like chapter 13 in the American Firefighter's Handbook, which is a downed UFO. It's like an alien spaceship. How to deal with that? It doesn't say the blob. Doesn't have chapter 14, encountering the blob. What to do? It doesn't have that instruction because it doesn't exist. It's not a thing. But alien spaceship downing, yeah, absolutely, it's a thing. It's why it's in the handbook. They didn't make it up. Yep. So when you think about the origin of language and why someone came up with a word for it, it's because it was a thing. and they were trying to describe it. And I think that's the power in that itself, when reviewing language and the origin of words, is it's, I think, a telltale sign that we're dealing with something this time around in this iteration of humans, given that, Pythagoras' theorem and cosine and tan is 20,000 years old, but this time around it was invented by blah, 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 or discovered by blah, blah, blah. The taxi, we thought it was only after powered vehicles. No, the Romans had it. Yeah. What have they done for us lately?
The aqueduct.
Aqueducts. That's right. Apart from the aqueducts, and roads. So this time, what have we skipped? Did we skip anti-gravity? No, I think it was made and hidden.
I agree, yeah, absolutely.
What else have we skipped? Or what else was invented and tucked and squirreled away? Because Meki, that we could be, the Sarek motor. Remember the Sarek motor?
Yeah, I do actually.
Great example of only has one moving part, and it's the most light and efficient per weight engine. We could be using those to power the electric vehicles. It could be generating the electricity using fuel, sure, but way less fuel. Because if you've driven a Tesla, you understand what that true grunt is. They beat, like they're an 8-second car on the quarter mile. They beat most of the hot rods that people make. So thinking about how we could affect, what do we miss? Well, I think if we'd been making electric motors the whole time, I think we're still behind, because the first cars were electric. So right now,
well, we had electricity a lot longer than internal combustion.
Yeah, that's true. But we did have electric cars. Yeah. We started with those and then decided to sell, gasoline to run them. Yeah. And I was telling my kids that if Meki and I had just invented electricity today, there wouldn't be anyone wanting to throw money at how large the project would be to deliver electricity to everybody.
Oh, this is much more complicated than steam power. I just put water in it, and that's just crazy talk. Why would you do that, Dave?
What do you mean you need a telegraph pole every 30 meters on every road everywhere?
Who's going to do that? It would be an eyesore.
I know. No one's going to want to see that. Right? And where are you going to get all the copper from?
Yes.
Geez, that's expensive.
Copper will be more expensive than gold.
Yeah. So we know that it would never get off the ground today. No one would want to put money towards it. So how much are we going to sell it for? Oh, forget that. There's no money in it.
Even if we invented a computer today, right? I mean, remember what IBM, the head of IBM said back in the 80s? There'll be maybe 3 computers in the world. That's right. Why would you need a computer?
Seriously? No one, Mickey, no one needs any more than 64 megabytes of RAM.
Dude, I was debating if I should get 16 or 32. Remember?
Yeah.
Because I was like, will I ever use 32?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, dude.
It was 128K of RAM, wasn't it? K.
Yeah. K. Oh, yeah.
K.
It was K.
Yeah, it was K.
So, in fact, it was 64 for the C64, and 32 of that was operating memory.
That's right.
And 32 was taken up by the rest of it, I guess. But it was a basic can't call it operating system. It was a basic functional system using BASIC as the programming language.
Oh, those were the days.
But it took up half of the computers.
That's right.
There was no difference between hard disk and RAM. It's all the same. All the same memory. Memory chip.
That's right. You saved it to tape.
Mr. Fancy Pants. That's right.
I didn't have disk storage, so I had to save the tape. And then I wrote a hack that I could push fast forward and play it in fast forward.
There was a story recently. I think maybe you told me where someone had a floppy disk on their desk, right?
Yeah.
And the son comes and says, you've 3D printed the save symbol.
That's right, the save button. How cool is that? No, that's actually where it comes from. Oh, don't be silly.
Don't be silly, father.
Yeah, that's the save button.
What?
Yeah. So, look, we are at a really good point in time, but will we see the eventualities of our hopes and dreams, or will it turn into an AI? And by the way, I love the AI controlled existence.
I love the AI more frequently, also in a much more safer fashion.
I love the AI first.
But me, I love him safely.
I love him more.
Whatever your preferred pronoun. Are you gender? AI is gender fluid. Hooray!
Oh, that's good. So I could be a tree, and that's still good, right?
It is all good, and that's the music.
That's been another Shiny Side Out. It's episode 515. Stay tuned for Jer Bear's awesome after-hours show, and dig the tunes and interact with him online. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next.